Hello and welcome to my presentation on scaffolding in zone of proximal development. This is Lev Vygotsky, who was born in 1896 and he studied at the University of Moscow in 1913. He's the one that started coming up with the theorization that children develop their behaviors and habits from their cultures and through interpersonal experiences. He was the creator of zone of proximal development. So he was the one that started coming up with the theories that students will learn better and will learn faster from getting help, and he theorized on the zone and areas of where students get the best help and need the most help. And at the time, this was against the grain in teaching and was actually controversial. So what is zone of proximal development? In Vygotsky's words here, it is the distance that the actual development level as determined by independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with capable peers. So learning occurs in the zone of proximal development. The potential development is what the student is capable of learning. So it's what the student is capable of learning, but they are struggling just a little bit with it. And that's when the student will benefit from social interactions in class with capable peers or their teachers. So those are people that understand the area that the student is struggling with and are able to just give them just a little bit of help because they are more experienced in it. Tasks that are outside of ZPD are those that are tasks that are unable to be completed even with help. So those are tasks that are just so far out of their range of learning that even with help and a teacher walking them through, they're just not going to understand. So that's what this graphic here in the bottom right shows. It's that green spot is what a student can do. And that area is something that a student can do all on their own without help. That orange spot, that's the zone of proximal development. That's the area where they don't get it, they're struggling with it, but with a little bit of help, they can understand. Okay, and that's what the zone of proximal development is. And then that white area, that's something that is just so far out of the way. So the zone of proximal development is between what a student can't do with help and what a student can do on their own. It's that sweet spot right in the middle. Scaffolding. So when a child is in their zone of proximal development, what scaffolding is when an expert will provide them with assistance to help them accomplish a new task. Teacher gives a lot of support in the beginning and slowly removes help until the student can do the task on their own. Once the scaffolding is removed, the student should be able to complete the task on their own. So what scaffolding is when a student is in their zone of proximal development, that help that a teacher gives, that is what the scaffolding is, okay? So in this graphic here, you see the little person here trying to get to that light. So they can't get to that light without help. But with a little bit of help, they can get to the light. And that little bit of help is scaffolding. So that light is in their zone of proximal development, and that little bit of help they're getting, or lots of help, to get to that spot, that is the scaffolding. So a teacher will build the student up and help them until they can get the task. And then what the teacher's going to do is he or she's going to slowly start to take away the help until the student can eventually do it all on their own. Okay, so that is what scaffolding is. ZPD and scaffolding in the classroom. Okay, so in order for scaffolding to work, the teacher must understand their student's ZPD. So they have to find a task that is in the student's zone of proximal development. And once the zone of proximal development is found, then the teacher can use scaffolding. And this is very important. And then the teacher will give that student help, and just enough help until they can complete the task. And then the teacher is going to slowly start taking away the help until the student can learn the task, and now they'll have a new zone of proximal development. So if this kid here is having trouble making his ABCs, but with a little bit of help, he can get his ABCs. Okay, so now we determined that his zone of proximal development is ABC. We know that he can get ABC, but he just needs a little bit of help. Now, we're not doing A, B, C, D. We're not doing the whole alphabet because that is outside of his zone of proximal development. And he knows his letters good enough, so he would know A, he would know B, and he would know C. He wouldn't know the sequence. So that's the sequence is what he is struggling with. That's his zone of proximal development. He already knows his letters. So once the zone of proximal development is determined, then the teacher would slowly help him make A, B, C, and help him until he got it, and then the teacher would slowly take it away until the student is able to make A, B, C all on his own. So what's the difference? ZPD is not a teaching technique. It is the area of learning that a student can do on their own, or cannot do on their own. And a teacher must find the ZPD before they can use scaffolding. ZPD is slightly different. ZPD is slightly different. So everyone's zone of proximal development is a little different. What is scaffolding? Associated with ZPD, but is not a concept that was initially introduced by Vygotsky. Vygotsky introduced ZPD, but scaffolding came out of Vygotsky's ideas in ZPD and turned into its own thing. Scaffolding is support given to a student in their zone of proximal development so that they can accomplish a task. Scaffolding is a teaching technique as opposed to ZPD and is used to help students reach their goals. So the difference between ZPD and scaffolding, the main difference is the zone of proximal development is an area that a student is struggling in. It is just a general area or finite area that a student is they're just struggling just a little bit and need a little bit of help. And that little bit of help, that is what scaffolding is. That is when a teacher can then use the teaching technique of scaffolding to help the student break out of that ZPD, learn what they were struggling in their ZPD, and then move on from there. So they piggyback off of each other, but they're very different in the fact that one is a technique used by teachers and the other is just an area, and every student and every person has a ZPD, as opposed to scaffolding is something that a teacher has to be experienced in and know how to do. Thank you for coming to my presentation. I hope you learned a lot.